Hi everyone, and welcome to a video for Monster Hunter Wilds. In today's video, I want to give my honest impressions of Monster Hunter Wilds, and specifically my time with the PC version. While Phantasy Star has always been the main franchise I focus on the channel, I got into Monster Hunter much more recently with Monster Hunter World. I had played a little bit of Monster Hunter beforehand. I played a little bit of the demo of Freedom Unite, and a little bit of Generations, but World was the main game that I got into in a big way. Since then, I've played World, Iceborne, Rise, Sunbreak, and a little bit of Generations and Generations Ultimate. I'm certainly not what you call a Monster Hunter veteran, but the last few games I have played quite considerably. Just before we get started with this, I just want to say that this review will contain some spoilers for the story of Wilds, so if you don't want any of the monster roster or story plot points spoiled, I would probably advise against watching this until you've done it yourself or until you've brought yourself up to speed. So we'll break this review down into a few categories. First, we'll look at what Monster Hunter Wilds is. We'll then cover the story, the different biomes, the monster roster and how the combat feels. After that, I'll also cover elements of the game I enjoyed, things I don't like, as well as an overall assessment of the current state of the PC version. So with that being said, let's jump into it. Just for reference, all the footage in this video was recorded on the PC version of the game, and the PC I use for this uses a AMD RX 7900 XTX GPU, a AMD 7800 X3D CPU and 32GB of RAM. So it's on the higher end of PCs, but this is just giving an idea of what the game looks like on those specs. So first things first, what is Monster Hunter Wilds? So Monster Hunter Wilds is the latest entry in the Monster Hunter franchise, which stretches back to 2004. The basic premise of the game, for those who are not familiar, is in the name of the game. You play as a hunter for the Hunters Guild, an organisation which researches and studies the world and the monsters in it. As a hunter, your main job usually involves keeping the monster populations in check by thinning them out. As the games have evolved over time, more and more weapon types have been added to the game. We're now up to 14 different weapon types as of Wilds. Generally, the game loop tends to involve hunting monsters, collecting their parts, and then using the parts to craft better and better armour and weapons. It's a really simple premise, but it does work. So how does Wilds fit into this? The story of Wilds focuses around the so-called Forbidden Lands, a part of the world that has been left unexplored. The guild, on a research assignment, spot a young boy laid in the desert sands and decide to rescue him. The boy is called Nata, and he belongs to an ancient tribe called the Keepers. He explains that he fled his village after a monster attacked it, and you discover that this monster is a long-thought extinct monster known as the White Wraith. This is where your hunter comes in. You're handpicked by the guild to travel to the Forbidden Lands, help Nata find his village, and investigate the White Wraith. So the way that Wilds does its story is actually pretty strange. Most of the Monster Hunter games that I've played are split into what are called low rank and high rank, which determines the difficulty of the game, as well as a few other things as well. For Wilds, the majority of the story is actually done in low rank, so you'll even see the ending credits before you reach high rank, which is kind of similar to how Monster Hunter Rise did it as well. Now, during the low rank part of the story, I feel the presentation is extremely well done. It shows off the unique personalities of each of the guild members, each of the different tribes that you encounter in the Forbidden Lands, as well as the monsters that you face off against as well. Without spoiling too much, there is a huge twist at the end of the story, which you'll either think is great or a big cop-out depending on your view. I've heard very mixed opinions on the ending of the story. Once you get into high rank, the way that the story is delivered noticeably changes. So instead of getting all these frequent cutscenes, you'll just get asked to investigate the regions to raise your hunter rank, which is a nice way of basically telling you, go and hunt anything and we'll let you know when there's more story. Every now and again you'll get a very sort of brief story interruption where a new monster will be introduced, or you'll go and hunt a high rank version of an existing monster. Honestly, I really enjoyed the story, at least much more than I thought I would. But I do feel that high rank in particular felt very rushed and unfinished. It felt almost like I got into high rank and then it was over before I even knew what was going on. That may well be the case, as the same thing happened with Monster Hunter Rise on the Switch. So for those who aren't aware, when Rise launched originally on the Switch, the story actually wasn't even finished. The last part of the story actually got added in a title update, and it kind of feels like that's what they're wanting to do with Wilds, but I'm not totally sure. So in terms of timeframes, I cleared low rank up to the ending credits in around about 14 or 15 hours, and that was playing quite casually. I've now, at the time of recording, played just over 50 hours, and I'm now at a point where I've hunted every monster in the game in high rank. and have completed all of the available high rank quests so far. Capcom have confirmed that more monsters will be added via title updates, the first being Mizitsune in around April. So perhaps the story will get incrementally added as the updates get delivered, so it could be similar to how Rise did it. Overall though, I thought that the story was interesting enough, but let's be real though, not many people play Monster Hunter for the story. So with the story out of the way, let's talk biomes. Wilds has a really good selection of biomes overall, and these biomes can change drastically due to one of the core themes of the game, which is dynamic weather, or dynamic seasons. Each area cycles through different seasons, and this affects a multitude of things in the game. So for example, certain monsters will only appear during specific seasons. For example, Gypceros will typically only appear during the fallow. Some endemic life may either come out or hide away depending on the season, and even the people in the villages will actually react to the seasonal changes. An example of that is in Kunafa village, all of the villagers will hide inside their homes when the sand tide happens, which is a really cool feature. It can be a little bit annoying sometimes because if you've got a quest to hand in with a villager there, you literally can't hand it in until the sand tide's ended. There is a way to sort of fast forward to another season, but yeah, if you're just visiting the village during the sand tide, you're not going to be able to talk to anyone. So normally, each area will have what's called a season of plenty, a season of fallow, and a season of inclemency, and the inclemency differs from area to area. So what are the biomes? So the Windward Plains is a vast plain and desert area. During the plenty it transforms into a lush savanna, but during the inclemency it experiences the sand tide, which is a ferocious sandstorm mixed with violent thunder and lightning. The Scarlet Forest is a tropical forest where the waters turn an ominous red during the fallow, and during the inclemency it features the downpour, which is an unabating monsoon. The Oilwell Basin is a cavernous region that erupts with lava and fire during the fire spring season, and the Ice Shard Cliffs occasionally experience terrible blizzards. There is another main area too, which has a very, very different weather cycle, but I'll let you discover that one for yourself. Overall though, the world does feel vibrant and full of life. I feel that these seasonal changes can happen very suddenly sometimes, but the change on the environment is massive and genuinely impressive. It should be noted as well that there are certain points in the story where the seasons will be locked in a specific area. There are certain things that happen that mean that the season won't change for a while, so during that the seasons won't change in the areas. Once you've beaten the story and so on, there will be this like regular cycle between the seasons. So what is a Monster Hunter game without the real stars of the show, the monsters themselves? Again, there are going to be big spoilers here, so you have been warned. On this, I find that the monster roster is a little bit of a mixed bag. The game features 29 large monsters, which honestly isn't too far off the usual amount for a base game. However, a couple of these monsters are what I would describe as altered versions. For example, there is Doshagama and Guardian Doshagama, which count as two separate monsters. There is also Rathalos and Guardian Rathalos, which again are two separate monsters. One thing that really surprised me was the fact that there were no Elder Dragons in the game at all. Well, sort of. The final boss in low rank kind of mimics one, and it is hinted that it is probably mimicking one. But the current most difficult monsters in the game at the time of recording are Arkveld, which is the game's flagship monster, and Gormagala. Again though, we are getting more monsters via updates, so perhaps Elder Dragons will be further down the line. That being said, I do feel that aside from a couple of cop-outs, the roster is largely varied, and there is a good mix of old and new monsters. There are far more new monsters, but there is a good little selection of old ones as well. Some of the new monsters are incredibly fun to fight. I feel that Jin Dahad in particular is a real showcase fight. Some of them, however, are either a little bit forgettable, such as Uthduna, or just outright annoying, such as Hirabami. Generally though, I feel that the roster is fine overall. It didn't really blow me away, but it certainly isn't terrible. It would be nice to have a couple more Elder Dragons down the line, but I feel that what we've got so far is reasonable. I don't think it's a fantastic roster, but I don't think it's terrible by any means. So next, let's move on to the combat. So after 50 hours, I've so far only really played a few weapons, honestly. I played Hammer for most of my playthrough, but I've also played a little bit of Dual Blades, Lance and Insect Glaive. I really enjoyed Hammer, Dual Blades and Lance, but Insect Glaive did disappoint me a little bit, honestly. I mainly played Insect Glaive in World, and I personally just don't like how the gameplay shifted for it in Wilds. This is entirely a personal opinion though, and I know a lot of people do like the changes to Insect Glaive. For me personally, I just feel like it's a little bit one-dimensional now. The combat in Wilds features a mechanic called Focus Mode. This allows you to use a reticle to help you target your desired part of the monster more easily. Focus Mode also has another function which I'll come back to in a second. Wilds also features a wounding mechanic for monsters. Now, anyone who played Iceborne, don't worry, it doesn't involve a stupid tacked on mechanic like the Clutch Claw. Instead, all you need to do to inflict a wound is repeatedly attack the same part of the monster with any attack. After a while, you'll see a cut on the monster, and this is a wound that you've made. Going into Focus Mode will then highlight the wounds in bright red so you can see them more easily. These wounds act as weak points whether you're in Focus Mode or not, and they'll take more damage from your attacks. From here you've got two main options. You can either just continue attacking the wound, which will eventually break, or you can use what's called a Focus Strike. A Focus Strike is performed by pressing a specific button while targeting a wounded part in Focus Mode. And a Focus Strike generally deals really good damage, and it will also destroy the wound. It'll sometimes also knock the monster down or make it stagger. It does seem to be a bit hit or miss whether it does that. I'm not sure what the criteria is for whether the monster falls down or not. Also, every time you break a wound, you'll also get a random monster part from it as well. Additionally, later in the game when you fight tempered monsters also have what are called tempered wounds, which are purple coloured wounds. If you break those, you get special materials as well from those. So unlike Iceborne, where in that I felt that the wounding mechanic was very forced in and became an absolute chore to do, particularly with light weapons where you had to wound the part twice to actually get the wound until very late in Iceborne's life, I feel that the way that it's done in Wild is much better. Focus Mode and Focus Strike just feel like a natural part of the hunt and are completely fluid. The Focus Mode also helps you to aim more accurately and target the part you actually want to target. It should also be noted as well that mounting a monster in Wild can also be used to inflict wounds as well. Some other new elements of the combat are power clashes and offset attacks. Power clashes are essentially where you get locked in an animation with the monster and you basically button mash to break through the monster's attack and knock it back. And offset attacks are generally attacks that you use where you attack at the same time as the monster does and you'll clash with the monster and knock the monster back reeling from it. So I won't talk about much more of those here, but they are another way of making the combat feel much more refreshing. I genuinely feel that the combat in Wilds probably feels better than ever for the most part, but this will also likely depend a little bit on which weapons you decide to use. So for me, again, as an Insect Glaive main in World, I really do not like Insect Glaive in Wilds. A lot of people are going to prefer it, a lot of people are going to love how it plays now, but for me it just wasn't something I was interested in using in Wilds. But other weapons that I didn't use much previously, I gravitate more towards. For example, Hammer. I love Hammer in Wilds. So yeah, I think it will depend on which weapons you want to use, really. And yes, that's weapons plural. Because another thing that Wilds does is allow you to take two weapons on a hunt. So a core thing of Wilds is that you're provided with a rideable bird wyvern called a Sacred. And one of the functions, as well as getting you around the map faster, it also allows you to carry two weapons, one of which is stored in a pouch on the Sacred. At any point during the hunt, you can jump on your Sacred, switch weapons and change things up. You can do that in the middle of a hunt. So, as example, say you want to put a monster to sleep and then capitalise on it, you could have a bowgun with sleep ammo, put the monster to sleep, jump on your Sacred, grab a great sword and then wake it up with the True Charge Slash. Now, admittedly, this isn't a feature I've used much because I honestly genuinely forget it exists, but it is a nice option to have for those who want to switch things up mid-hunt. So with that, let's start to wrap this review up. So first, let's start with the not so good things. First one is the PC performance. The PC performance, in a word, is shocking. With the build I mentioned earlier, I have to use AMD's fluid motion frames to get a stable frame rate above 60 FPS. Without it, and if I set the game rate to cap at 90 FPS, my frame rate was jumping as high as 90 and as low as 35 to 40. For me, turning on AMD's frame gen, which is fluid motion frames, allowed me to run the game at around 120 FPS easily, but many players on Steam have been struggling to even play the game at all. Some people can't even launch it. There are other people who are running at 10-15 FPS. So those who can run it are met with horrendous frame rates, terrible visuals. For some reason, a lot of the textures in the game seem to be incredibly low resolution. It's really off-putting. I've heard some people say it's down to a typo in one of the config files. I have changed that and it still looks terrible, so... There is a high-resolution texture pack, but the high-res texture pack requires at least 16GB of VRAM, which is going to immediately discount most people. And the high-res texture pack just prevents the game from launching for a lot of people as well. There's also issues with multiplayer disconnects. The monster AI can bug out quite a lot. For example, when I fought Jin Dahad in story, when he went to transition to a different area, he got stuck and just started squirming all over the place, and I literally couldn't complete the quest. I had to restart the entire quest again. To be blunt, the PC port is an absolute mess. From what I've heard, the console versions may fare better. I do know of at least a couple of people who play the PS5 version and don't seem to have had too many problems, but I have heard that Xbox might be a different story. I can't say for sure on that though, because I've only played the PC version myself. So the next bad point for me is the UI design. Firstly, I think that the UI design looks extremely basic and it almost feels like it doesn't fit the game or looks a little bit unfinished. Worst though is actually navigating it. For some reason, some UI elements feel like they're set up to be as annoying as possible. Example of this is, on controller, there is a button that opens your map. If, however, the game is showing notifications, such as a new monster spawning, or a quest completion or anything like that, or a side quest you've got a hand in, there is like a notification pop-up stream on the right-hand side of the screen. If any of those notifications are popping up, it prevents you from opening your map, because the button to open the notifications is the same as opening the map. So you basically have to wait until all the notifications go away before you can open your map again. If anyone does know a way around this, please tell me, because it is infuriating me every time I play it. Next, the terminology used for some of the multiplayer is very confusing at first. So you can invite players to what is called a link party. What this does is, if you're in a link party and one of your link members starts a quest, it will automatically send an invite to everyone else in that link party to invite them to the quest, which is cool. It makes things easier. However, there's also a thing called environment links. So this is for if you want to run outside camp. If you're just in a link party and you run outside camp, you won't see anyone else, because everyone's world is kind of instanced once you run outside. If you want to just run outside the camp and go and fight monsters or explore the areas, you have to be in what's called an environment link as well. So that involves... I don't think you can just invite to an environment link either as well. I think you have to invite to a link party first. So you basically have to be in the same lobby, invite to a link party, invite to an environment link, and then you can go outside. It just feels massively overwhelming at first when you first start playing. Over time you do get used to it, but at first it just feels like it's massively confusing for no reason. I suspect that the reason for the environment link is probably due to certain story events that impact on the weather in the regions, but it does make the multiplayer experience a little bit frustrating at times, especially with all the disconnects as well. So now that we've got the bad out of the way, let's get on to the good. So I've already talked about it, but the story was genuinely refreshing to have a somewhat interesting story, and also a story where your hunter actively takes part in. Finally, our hunter is not just a silent automaton. I did feel that the story was a little bit short, but otherwise I did have fun with it. As mentioned previously, some of the new monsters are absolutely fantastic, and the biomes are incredibly diverse and entertaining to walk through. The music and the atmosphere are also very, very well done, and the game is definitely one that you'll want to keep coming back to. There is a real benefit to just continuing to play and continue to hunt stuff. It feels like there's always a reason to hunt everything in the game as well, which I feel was a bit of a problem with World. I think once you got into World's endgame, you basically just hunt the Tempered Elder Dragons and nothing else. In this, it feels like there is always a reason to hunt more stuff. So, in conclusion, would I recommend Monster Hunter Wilds? This, honestly, it's a really tough one to answer. If you're primarily a PC player, I would strongly encourage looking into some of the performance issues that people are having. You could potentially risk buying the game, skip the cutscenes, which you can watch later if you want to, and get into some hunts to see if it runs okay for you before the 2-hour mark. If it doesn't, you can then just refund it on Steam, because providing you've played less than 2 hours, you can refund it. However, if you're not willing to do that, I would genuinely consider waiting for Capcom to address some of the performance issues on PC, because it does run terribly for most people. So for console players, I do feel like it's an easier recommendation, though again I have heard that some Xbox players apparently are also having issues as well. Monster Hunter Wilds is a fantastic game that, while far from perfect, is extremely entertaining. I think it builds on the success of Monster Hunter World, and it does do its job as a flagship of the franchise, no pun intended. There are definite areas for improvement, and I do feel that Capcom need to communicate better with the PC player base about all the issues that are going on at the moment. But with the issues I've mentioned aside, the game is genuinely great fun. I think that if you enjoyed Monster Hunter World, I would imagine that Wilds would be right up your street as well. So I hope you enjoyed this little impressions video. I do also have a squad on Monster Hunter Wilds, so if anyone is playing, the game is cross-play as well, so regardless of which platform you're on, you can still join the hunt or for joining the squad. If you do want to join the Fala Fam squad, feel free to join my Discord. The code is listed on my Discord, so feel free to join us over there. As always, if you have enjoyed the video, please consider either liking, subscribing, or joining as a member on YouTube. You can follow or sub over on Twitch, where we stream twice a week. You can follow me on X or Blue Sky, Section Skylight, and again I do have a Discord that you can join as well, so feel free to join us there. Yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. We will do some more Monster Hunter videos going forward. The channel will always primarily be Phantasy Star for the most part, but I do want to do some Monster Hunter Wilds videos as well. So yeah, keep an eye out for those, and hopefully see you guys out in the Forbidden Lands.